Hello, love. I'm Ashley Miley, and this is the Sacred Intimacy Temple, a podcast exploring love, sex, and relationships as a sacred spiritual path. Each episode is a remembrance of sacred intimacy, first with yourself, and then with Source, your beloved, family, and community. Come home to the temple within. Let's begin. Hello. Welcome back to the Sacred Intimacy Temple podcast. And today I am bringing you the third episode of our series, Coming Home to Intimacy. So last time we talked about sort of this mind layer component to how we have forgotten the path of intimacy and even more deeply sacred intimacy. And in that episode, I did start to sort of foreshadow in a way the piece around the body. And so I really want to talk about how the body is a part of this and a piece of this disconnection from this path. And in that is very often sort of the first step into coming back. So many of us, when we think about intimacy, relationships, sex, we can have a lot of challenges within those realms. I think many of us do. I hear it all the time. Even just the amount of strangers that come up to me, I have not said anything about myself to them whatsoever, but they just go into it with their relational challenges. So many of us, we can all relate, And even if it's the challenge is different, the energy, the feeling behind it can be very similar. And a lot of times we can sit here and think about all these challenges, and it's I just keep finding these people who don't work for me, or I just don't know how to do this whole dating, flirting, whatever thing, or I just can't figure out how to stop getting pissed off at my partner for doing this thing, whatever it might be. We always equate it to something almost out there. It's that person, it's what they're doing, it's how they're responding. And sometimes there can be a level of ownership of I'm just really bad at flirting and whatever it might be. But again, we kind of think about it's just something out there. It feels like this thing that we can fix. It's just if I could just get the right formula or the right thing, then I wouldn't be having these issues in relationship. And I want to present, possibly kind of deepen or expand the idea a little bit. And I really want to bring you back to the piece around the body. And how, when I think about challenges in relationship, when I think about the challenges I've experienced in relationships, intimacy, sex, all that, a lot of it has often come back to the body. And in a more simplistic way, or a different way to kind of name that, many times we are disconnected from ourselves. In that way, we're also disconnected from other people. Because there's a lack of connection to ourselves, it can be more challenging to connect to other people. So then it's when, for example, you're in a partnership and you are experiencing conflict with your partner, but you are disconnected from yourself, it's very hard to actually have adequate repair in those moments. Because the foundation of being able to really move through anything is about being able to stay tethered to yourself. And, well, in that way, it's where does that disconnection happen? And what does that even mean? And even disconnection to yourself, disconnection from your body is also disembodiment. So it's when, for example, we are disconnected from our body, we are disconnected from ourselves, and in that we are disembodied, we bring it to a relational moment. And I'm going to use sex because I think it's just a bit of a more straightforward example. But again, that idea of we can have a desire in sex and our partner can have a desire in sex. And let's say more so our partner is expressing even just the desire for sex, let alone whatever kind of sex, but they want to have sex. We're disconnected, we're disembodied, da-da-da-da-da. So it's we might not even be able to know that we're a no to sex in this moment. And even our body can be sharing that with us. But because we're disconnected from ourselves and we're disembodied, we can't even like feel into the no. We can't even hear the signals our body's telling us, like a tightness, or even like in women, like the sort of closure that can be experienced in the vagina, and how then it kind of forces, if you're receiving like a penis or cock, like the receiving of that is harder. Those types of things where it's like your body's telling you you're no, but we're disconnected, so we don't hear it. We're disembodied. So even then, like, we're having sex and it's like, I'm a no to it, but we're in this sexual moment where we're having sex. And it's disembodied in this way of like, we're not even in our bodies, we're not even connected to each other, and we're basically just kind of like using ourselves as like fuck toys, you know? So that all comes from this experience of being disconnected, and disconnection creates disembodiment. And disembodiment is really like what creates this experience then of disembodiment and disconnection. What, maybe more a simple way to ask is like, what makes us disconnected from our body? Because embodiment and connection starts with our body. It is not something of the mind. The mind can support it, but it is not of the mind. It is of the body. So what disconnects us from our body? I think, in a really simplistic way, it's trauma. And I want to partially expand the definition of trauma, if that is helpful. So lots of times we can think of trauma as those like what a lot of people identify as like big T moments. So it's like natural disaster, car accident, those singular events. But it can also be things like abuse that is kind of more consistent, but it's a big T trauma. So that's one dimension of trauma. Another dimension is like little t trauma, which is actually where most of us experience trauma. And again, there's also a lot of us that experience both of these, like a mixture. And so little t trauma is this kind of chronic nature, this chronic nature of being unmet, this chronic nature of being not seen, not felt, not heard, the lack of attunement, the lack of being known for a long period of time. And because many of us, again, are disconnected from our bodies, it makes it really hard to offer that to another person. And so then it kind of gets passed down as like, you know, if my mom is unable to be connected to herself, to her body, to her emotions, how is she going to offer attunement to me and my emotions? And so she very likely had an experience of not being seen, felt, heard, understood, attuned to. And then she passes that along because she hasn't developed the skills to give that to me. Or maybe she developed a little bit of it, but still, like, I then have that experience. And it just gets passed down. And we're, again, all these bodies moving around, having this experience of disconnection, disembodiment, not knowing our bodies, not knowing what's going on in here. And so trauma is a big piece of that. And so when I think about trauma on an individual level, but also in this kind of collective field and then in the collective experience, when you think about, well, what is like the trauma that infiltrates intimacy? Well, in a very obvious way, like relational and sexual trauma is a big piece of that. So it's like, if you've been raped, if you've gone through sexual abuse, that is going to be trauma that deeply disconnects you from your body. Relational trauma could be an abusive relationship, but again, it can kind of feed into this idea and this dynamic of the unmetness that we can experience growing up. And then that also feeds into attachment trauma and developmental trauma. And if you think about people who've experienced all of these types of trauma, which like I would put myself into that category, and I've experienced that on an individual sort of level, but obviously like I've existed in relationship systems or family systems of where some of this is playing out. So there's more of a collective nature to it. Like that's just a lot of trauma. That's a lot to be sitting with. That's a lot to be moving with. And usually like it's a very oversimplified way, but it's like when you go through very challenging experiences like that of trauma relationally, sexually, developmentally, attachment-wise, when you have chronically been unmet your whole life in all kinds of layers and all kinds of ways, there is a lot of sensation. There's a lot of emotional material in your body that has not been digested. That sort of cycle, that stress cycle of our emotions in a way, has not been completed. And most of us have learned it's not safe to feel what we're feeling. It's not safe to be with our bodies. So we stuff it down into our bodies. And eventually we just become full of shit that hasn't been processed, for lack of a better term. Lots of different emotions, lots of different beliefs. It develops into parts. That's how we get lost parts, repressed parts. The whole shadow concept kind of comes from this. And we have learned, like, for example, if I am chronically unmet emotionally by a parent, and that causes an experience of yearning and grief inside of my own body, and I am a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, upwards into teenage, and I don't know how to process that, I subtly disconnect from my body because it's actually not safe and I can't survive if I'm attuned to that energy, to that experience in my own body. I have to disconnect to survive because, again, my mentality and my knowingness in that moment is about survival and not, for lack of a better term, thriving. And I have to disconnect from my body to stay alive. Because if I were to sit in this when I don't have capacity or tools to process that level of yearning and grief, you obviously wouldn't die per se, but there's kind of this this idea and this internal experience of dying. And that's what we're trying to avoid when we're just living in survival. And so when you think about how, if you went through these types of trauma, it would be really challenging to go into sex and relationships. And I can say that because that's been my lived experience, But then, even if, for example, maybe you haven't experienced these types of traumas, but we're existing in a collective field. So, for example, maybe you have not experienced relational, sexual, developmental attachment trauma, but maybe a friend of yours has. That's going to play out in your friendship. Maybe your partner has. That's going to play out in the partnership. And that's going to affect that person's ability to be in their body, to be connected to what they need and desire, to be able to communicate that. And that's going to create limitations in the depth that the relationship can have, or the capacity of the relationship, if you will. And so what becomes really significant to understand is that, again, you go through these experiences, or you're in the field of these experiences, and somehow we're all sort of then in that way getting disconnected from our bodies. But intimacy, relationship, really, truly happens and is created and experienced through the body. And a great example of this, in a way, is there can be people who have insecure attachment, who are able to attract in people with secure attachment. Someone who is safe, someone who wants to love them, someone who wants to support them and show up for them. And if that person with insecure attachment is disconnected from their body, what part of the issue, or part of the reason they can't receive that love, that support, that connection that's being available, being made to them, being offered to them, is because you can only experience that in the body. Or you can only, sort of experience intimacy and relationship through the body. So there can be a part of your mind that understands wait a second, this person's different. They really do want to be here for me. But even your mind's going to have a really hard time actually seeing that and getting on board with that because of everything that's within your body, and then the disconnection from your body. And so when we're disconnected from our body, especially for a long period of time, this is where we really get into that experience of numbness. And a lot of us have started to almost normalize the experience of numbness. And then even we use substance as well to, if we do have some degree of capacity to feel what's going on in our body, but it's too much and we don't know how to be with it, it's too overwhelming, we'll use, substances of all kinds. And it's not just drugs and alcohol and sex, but it's shopping and being addicted to certain types of whatever it might be, that becomes a way that we numb ourselves out. And that becomes really normal. And then again, if two very numbed out humans come together to be in a relationship, they're both numbed from their body, they cannot feel their body, they're not connected to their body, it's going to be really hard to actually create a deeper relationship. There can be a capacity to be able to create that in the mind, but like to really receive it, to really experience what is there in that relationship is going to be really hard. And then to deepen that and to, again, like really return to that level of intimacy that is very innate to all of us. That isn't just for the chosen few or whatever. Like we all have that capacity. And even if you've been through really significant trauma, you have not lost that capacity. That innate capacity to be deeply connected and intimate with others is something that cannot be taken away from you, no matter what has happened in your life, no matter what your experience has been. But it does ask of you, and the gift almost of going through, say, really significant trauma, relationally and sexually and all that, is it innately almost like forces you to come back to your body. And that's because it lives in your body, and your body knows the only way to actually move through that is through the body. The body is the portal. The body is the space holder of all of that. And when you're able to be and move through some of that experience and you open up space in your body, that's where you can start to drink in the connection, the intimacy that's available for you. And you're able to sort of recognize that on a conscious level. You're able to like feel that in your body. And then that helps you also then shift your beliefs as well. And so when we think about, I think also like, there's disconnection and disembodiment, but when we have unhealed trauma, a lot of the reasons that a lot of us are struggling in relationship and in intimacy and all that right now is because of like the side effects of unhealed trauma. And so it's like, if you think about someone who's gone through trauma, on the other side of that is chronically a dysregulated nervous system. That nervous system is in hypervigilance. That nervous system is constantly scanning for danger. It is not interested. I mean, like in some ways it is interested in intimacy. It is interested in connection. Again, like there's a part of it that understands it needs that. But again, it's more consumed with like, am I going to die or am I safe? And so it's constantly scanning for danger, constantly scanning for like what could become dangerous. And if you have been hurt in relationship, even just the experience of someone coming towards you can feel, if you have a like chronically dysregulated nervous system, can feel extremely dangerous. Even if that's a good-hearted, loving human who wants to just be connected, it can feel really dangerous. And so we'll lash out because of dysregulation. If we have dysregulated nervous systems, it becomes really hard to move through conflict. It becomes really hard to move through triggers in relationship. So repair becomes very challenging. And repair is a necessity to create safety and trust in a relationship that, again, can like continue to like grow and evolve. We also sort of through the unhealed trauma, we develop a lack of, I would almost call it like emotional literacy. Because we're disconnected from our bodies, because we're disconnected from emotions and pieces of ourselves, we don't actually know what we're feeling. And it doesn't become, like, it's not a necessity, for example, to be like, like, this is exactly, I know that this is sadness. I know that this is grief, and I know that this is anger. But when you start coming back to your body, and you're just trying to, like, suss out a little bit, like, what's going on here? Like, how can I help this? It can be very helpful to sort of have that experience of being able to recognize, like, oh, like, I'm feeling really angry right now, or like, oh, I am feeling such heartbreak right now. And from that place, eventually, it just becomes about being attuned to the sensation versus like labeling it. But when you think about relationships, for example, it's very helpful to be able to identify in a way what you're experiencing, what you're needing, what you're feeling, to name that to another person so that, and again, like even just naming that becomes an invitation for intimacy, let alone like, I'm feeling disconnected from you, and in order to feel connected to you, I would need this right now. But if you don't have literacy around your emotions and what's going on inside of your body, even at some point being able to maybe express, this is the sensation I'm noticing in my body, or like I'm noticing myself in this like younger part of myself. If you don't have that literacy within yourself, and then from that, the ability to articulate, it becomes harder to be in relational moments where it's like, you're going to trigger each other. It's like innate, like it's just a given. But again, like how we move through that can create more intimacy, can create more understanding. And again, like we can use those moments to alchemize like the unfelt material with like the support and witness of someone else. And that can be really powerful, especially for us, for many of us who maybe felt very alone growing up or didn't have support in that sort of way growing up. It can be very powerful. But we have to have that literacy of ourselves. And trauma, again, it disconnects us from understanding that about ourselves. It makes it really hard to identify what's going on or what we're feeling or to articulate it. And especially when things get coupled up, it becomes even harder. And the other, I think, major piece of like a side effect of unhealed trauma is just, again, like when you've experienced trauma, you're sort of thrusted into this experience of like die or survive. You're always focused on survival for a bit of time. And so in that, you have, like, as you're surviving trauma, you're learning, like, who do I have to be? What do I have to do to survive this experience? And that becomes your conditioning of like, this is how I move through the world. This is how I relate to people. I survive. I relate to people by pushing them away. I survive. I relate to people by grasping onto them. If we're talking about, say, for example, anxious versus avoidant sort of attachment, these become survival mechanisms. Or even like, I'm so enmeshed, like I have to literally like abandon myself, abandon my needs, abandon my desires, and be what that person needs so that I get love, so that I'm safe, so that I survive. And so we're living out of survival adaptations, survival mechanisms. And they're not genuinely true to who we are. And they're also not very supportive of cultivating connection and relationships and intimacy. And even if they might have some level of creating that, it's really unhealthy dynamics they often create. And again, like we're living sort of in that transactional sort of space of like, you know, I need to survive. And there's a part of us that can recognize I need other people to survive. And so it's like the survival adaptation is that self-abandonment, that people pleasing in a way of like, who do I have to be to get love from this person, to get connection from this person? And playing out some of these patterns, having some of these kind of experiences makes it really hard to really have healthy relationships, let alone something really sacred, to be feeling connected and belonging to other people. And so it becomes a necessity to return to our bodies. It becomes a necessity to learn how to relate, not from our minds so much, but from our bodies. And again, that doesn't mean the mind's not part of it, but it's really about like, what's going on in my body and how can I bring this other person into this experience with me? How can I also get curious about this other person's experience in their body? What are both of our bodies like saying? And like from that awareness, what are we choosing to do next? Like, what are we leaning into? What, that sort of thing. And being aware, even more simplistically, like from a self level of like being connected to your body is just like, what am I feeling? What is going on inside of me? What part of me am I living from? And from that awareness, like how can I meet myself better? What am I really being shown that I need? How can I tend to myself better? I find that, and again, like the connection of the body, like knowing someone else's body, knowing what's going on inside of your own body. There's a way that it just kind of creates this innate intimacy. Like, I'm not really sure how to put it into words, but it's like, it's really profound and very sacred in a way to be able to recognize like this situation in relationship is happening for me. And if I tune into myself, if I kind of like remove myself and I'm just like, hey, I'm like with myself, with my body, you're able to tune in and you're able to be like, wow, like there's so much fear here. I have so much fear of expressing myself. And in that, I'm afraid of rejection. I'm afraid of abandonment. I can feel that it's like this little, young, beautiful girl inside of me who just so desperately wanted love. And she learned that if she did express herself, that she would not get love. And it's really profound to feel that in your body and to just be like, wow, like no wonder this situation's really hard for me. Like, no wonder. And like, wow, like all I want to do is just give this little part of me love and let her know that it'll be okay. And that I'll always be here for her. And that I think she's the most like special and beautiful and magical little girl in the whole wide world. And I'm so sorry that no one ever told you that or saw that in you before, but I do. And I am utterly grateful that I get to be the one to witness it and hold you and take care of you. And from that kind of place, being able to tune into like what part of me could hold this little girl, but also hold the desire to express, the need to express something. And no matter what happens when I do that, knowing that I've got myself and knowing that somehow, even if that meant that the whole relationship would deteriorate from that expression, that somehow, like that's actually intimacy too. Because intimacy isn't just the gooey, lovey, like we all love that. We love the goo, we love the love, the pleasure, the connection, the whatever. But sometimes intimacy is like naming the hard truth and like the discomfort of that. Sometimes it's like being in the muck and the mud together. And sometimes intimacy is being like, for where you are and where I am and what we need and whatever, like this can't actually continue. And that's like the most intimate thing that we can name and be in the experience of. Because again, sometimes intimacy, relationship, it is this dance between leaning in and leaning out. And sometimes that means that there needs to actually be this almost like permanent leaning out and this bowing out, if you will. And recognizing that's intimate, that's holy, that's sacred, that's relating. But finding the part of you who has that level of awareness and being able to anchor into that and then moving into that relational moment where it's like, I would express myself. And I could even maybe name to this person, hey, I noticed that there's actually this huge fear around expressing this to you because the story I have is that you will reject me. And maybe that is true. And I know that sharing this, being authentic, being vulnerable, is really the only way that we can actually be connected. And in that, this is what I have to tell you. This is how you made me feel. This is what I want. This is what I need, whatever it is. Being able to move through the world that way, and whether it's just like in that moment with yourself, but also then in the extension to other people, it's really profound. And again, that can only really happen from the connection to the body. And I think one of the most kind of ironic things about trauma is it's like it knows, it knows that our power, our truth, our knowing, everything is within the body. And again, like the trauma disconnects us from the body. But that means that the pathway back from the trauma, the resolution of the trauma, the reclaiming from the trauma, to not live in the trauma, like the resilience against the trauma is to come back to the body. I know there have been times in my life where I've been like, wow, like, I don't want to live as this trauma, but how do I do that? Like, how do I defy the trauma? And it's like, just coming back to the body. That's all it takes. Being able to just notice my breath. Being able to feel my body. And again, like that journey starts with yourself. And from that place, you are able to open your field and expand your curiosity and awareness to be aware of other people's bodies. And again, like we experience relationship and intimacy through our bodies. And then also like our bodies, as I've mentioned before, like they're already communicating. So much of the time we're in a relational moment, more of what we're actually picking up on is the person's body versus like what they're actually doing or saying. And so again, like the trauma influences that. And so that's how, for example, you can have moments where someone's like, I'm a yes to sex. But you can literally see their body being like, I'm a yes to sex. And you're like, your body's like literally closed. Like, I don't think you're a yes. But again, like if we're not attuned to that in ourselves, it's going to be really hard to be attuned to that in others. And then it's like, that's how we continue to sort of hurt each other. And not intentionally, but just because we haven't returned to the body, we haven't come back to it. We don't recognize the level of disconnection and disembodiment. We are experiencing numbness. And if there is anything that we're sort of trying to chase that's a little bit like outside the numbness, it's like these high experiences like pleasure, like love and connection, but they're not sustainable without really being anchored into the connection and embodiment of our body. And so, you know, like thinking about what has disconnected us from the path of intimacy, it is the trauma and the pieces that have disconnected us from the body, because the body is what holds intimacy. The body holds the path of intimacy, and it holds your unique path of intimacy. Because again, our body's also, not only is it holding these parts and emotions and things like that, but it's holding wisdom as well. We can only listen and have the presence to do that when we're connected to our body. And then we can follow our own path. And sometimes that means we're doing something that's like, I have no idea why I'm leaning into this relationship, or I have no idea why I'm leaning into this moment, but that was the truth of my body, and I'm going to trust that and follow that. Even if it gets a little weird looking on the other side. And that's kind of like a form of surrender. And that's how we evolve relationship, evolve intimacy, and again, like return to what has been. Because I do believe that there is a period of time in this world where it's like, we knew how to do this dance of coming in and coming out. We knew how to be in the human, but also in the divine of us. We knew how to bring that into relationship and to work in that sort of collective field with another individual or multiple people, if we're talking about like a family or a community. But I think one of the biggest ways, again, that we have become disconnected from the path of intimacy is because of the disconnection from our body. And so it becomes a really, again, like first important step of coming back to the body and building that relationship to the body. And in some ways, building a relationship to yourself is about building a relationship to your body. So that is all I have to share for today, or at least for now. And I really hope that through listening to this, one, that if you have been someone who's experienced a lot of trauma and you are disconnected from your body, or you're in the midst of reconnecting, but you've had a lot of challenge maybe in intimacy, I hope you just find some compassion for yourself. It makes a lot of sense. And you've been doing such a good job keeping yourself alive and surviving. And like, you get to move into something new now. And maybe if, for example, that story is not true for you, maybe even just recognizing like, wow, like the body is really involved in relationship and intimacy. And how can I bring that more online? Like, how can I be more aware of that? Whether it's like, I actually want to notice like what my partner's body is doing when we're in conflict and just get curious about that. It could also be like, maybe I actually want to like express myself more through my body in relationship. Follow that impulse. I hope that you can just have a lot of reverence for your body and what it's been holding and the wisdom that it holds, and that your body is the one that holds things that can never be forgotten. Like that can never be taken away from you. We may have forgotten them. You may have forgotten what your experience of intimacy is to be in this life. But your body holds the keys, holds the blueprint, holds the medicine of that. It's just a matter of like working with the body to remember it, to bring that wisdom forward. And then with that wisdom that you hold and you acting on it and moving as that, that's how you become embodied in like your magic, your truth, your path, whatever that is for you. And the body in that way is so powerful. And it is a sacred ally on this journey. And I hope that you can really leave today knowing and feeling that. Maybe even just taking a moment to put your hands on your body, however you feel called. Be even just like holding your face and being like, wow, like, thank you, body. You're incredible. You're amazing. I love you. And maybe you don't have that much enthusiasm, but you're like, yeah, like, honey, you're all right. You're pretty cool. I'm open to you. we'll find our way to each other, even that. Celebrating that. So as we come to the end of this episode, I just want to express my gratitude for your presence, for you being here, for being in this space with me, for coming back to the temple. It is always such a pleasure to join you, to have you here, to have your unique wisdom, your unique body here in the space. And if there's a part of you that feels a recognition that there is a really deep journey for you in terms of returning to your body, getting to know your body better, bringing your body forward into relationship, I want to tell you about the next intimate step session. So this is a 75-minute one-on-one session with me that is designed to help you experience one shift that will transform your intimate life while also initiating your unique path to deeper intimacy. And in this session, we'll take one of your intimacy challenges, maybe like being numb or being disconnected from your body, and we will use personalized body-based inquiry and embodiment processes to help work through that challenge. As a launch special for this podcast series, I am offering these sessions for just $60. They are normally $150, so this is a great deal. And I'm also only offering 16 sessions. So once they're gone, they are gone, baby. The sessions are now available to be purchased, and they will either close when all the sessions have been sold or at the latest by Sunday, April 19th at 11:59 p.m. So if you are wanting support with really coming back to your body and bringing your body back into intimacy, I would love to work with you. And I want to invite you to find the link to take your next intimate step in the show notes below. And if you're able to get a session, I deeply look forward to working with you and getting to just celebrate you and your body and helping you step into that. As again, so grateful for your presence, and I'm sending you so much love. Thank you for walking the path with me today. If you're feeling called to go deeper, everything you need is at thesacredintimacytemple.com. Join the community there to stay connected and be the first to know about new episodes, offerings, and what's coming up inside the temple next. And if this episode moves something within you, share it with a friend who's ready. I'll see you in the next episode. Come home to the temple within.